in MS OBGYN at KMC Manipal and also had won the Zulekha Begum gold medal during her graduation. She has done her fellowship from National Board of Examinations and her diploma in medical law and ethics through the National Law School. She's contributed to several research papers, textbooks, and also is a part of the fellowship training program at both Genia and Miller. Over to Dr. Divya.
Thank you for the kind introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank Team KISAR for giving me this opportunity to talk on this very important topic. As Dr. Apura, she just told my words. I was just about to tell the audience that ultrasound is like the third eye to the infertility specialist. We cannot even imagine our practice without ultrasound. I'm very happy to speak on this topic. I have 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I know. I call them what and why and when, and how and where and who. Understanding folliculometry on these basic questions: what is monitoring of ovarian stimulation? Examining or monitoring an induced or natural cycle to assess the follicle size, maturity, timing of ovulation, and timing intercourse, insemination, and oocyte retrieval for IVF. This is called as monitoring of ovulation, monitoring of stimulation. This is necessary to improve the chance of pregnancy and also to assure patient safety by preventing ovarian hyperstimulation and also by preventing multiple pregnancy. Why do we have to monitor? Ultrasound has got numerous advantages for monitoring the stimulation. That is, 1, predicting ovarian response, monitoring pituitary downregulation, checking adequate dosage of gonadotropins, avoiding complications, and deciding timing. Timing is everything in reproductive medicine, and ultrasound is a very good friend of ours for timing. It also has several advantages like needs special training, is time consuming, need not always be accurate, increases anxiety for the couple. When and how to monitor, there are different types of monitoring, and it depends on what kind of treatment we have planned. If it is just a timed intercourse, home monitoring is good enough. Timed intercourse with ovulation induction, again home monitoring is good enough. When we are planning for an IUI without ovulation induction, ultrasound monitoring becomes mandatory. However, it could be minimal, but when it is associated with ovulation induction or superovulation, we have to do TVS, which is more frequent. Needless to say, controlled ovarian stimulation, we have to do serial ultrasounds and also hormonal assays. Where and who should monitor? It depends on the type of treatment planned again. Depends on whether it is a timed intercourse cycle, IUI cycles, or an IVF cycle. And also whether we are planning an insemination. And in an IVF, definitely hospital monitoring is required or clinic monitoring is required, where we have to do an ultrasound and also laboratory monitoring will be needed by trained doctor. So with this, the overview of today's presentation is about history, methods of monitoring stimulation, folliculometry in detail, objectives of monitoring, records of monitoring, and conclusion. Going back to the yesteryears of Patrick Steptoe and Bob Edwards, did you know it was an uphill task to measure ovulation or to detect LH peak? In fact, doctors were asking for urinary samples from these women every 3 hours to detect LH surge. Hats off to their commitment. Because of their efforts, we are enjoying today's IVF with so much of ease. And did you know when we started ultrasound? The ultrasound examination was first started in 1978 by Hackloer and showed linear correlation between the follicle size and the E2 levels. And I just want to show you how the ultrasound images were there in 1978. As you can see, this is the follicle here, which grows. Now it is on the left side, which is approximately 15 millimeter. You can see this follicle, which is almost pre-ovulatory. With this, they have done so much of work in infertility. Coming to the methods of monitoring, one is transvaginal ultrasound and also biochemical and hormonal. In transvaginal, we have follicular monitoring and endometrial monitoring. Ultrasound, it could be 2D or 3D or even power Doppler imaging. Hormonal is E2, LH and progesterone for monitoring stimulation. We have to understand ultrasound states the morphological growth of follicles, whereas hormones indicate the functional activity of the follicles. Which is better? Is it ultrasound or hormones, or is it combination of two? Meta-analysis suggests that there is no significant difference in the number of oocytes retrieved or incidence of OHSs. However, the quality of evidence was low. awaiting a large well-designed RCT. Until such a trial is considered feasible, cycle monitoring by TVS plus E2 may need to be retained as a precautionary good practice point. Coming to the actual topic, that is the stepwise approach to folliculometry. Before starting folliculometry, it is mandatory to do a baseline scan. And what are the objectives of doing a baseline scan? One, to rule out ovarian and uterine pathology, to check ovarian reserve, and also to detect ovarian cyst or hydrosalpinx, and I'll tell you why. We have to rule out ovarian and uterine pathology. It could be endometriotic cyst, it could be a dermoid cyst, it could be a fibroid, which could be even submucous or even intramural, or it could be even adenomyosis. All these diagnoses on baseline will have a lot of repercussions on the type of investigation modality which we are going to choose, and also the kind of treatment what we are going to plan. Let me ask a few of, all of you, how do you measure ovarian volume? Can anybody tell me quickly? Obviously, we take it in 3 dimensions. We take it in dual mode. But how do we know that we are taking the right measurements? So for that, it's very important for us to understand. We have to first take the longitudinal axis of the ovary, then the transverse axis. How do we know it is longitudinal axis? As we all know, one of the boundary for the ovarian fossa is iliac vessel. We have to take the section parallel to the iliac vessel, that is the longitudinal diameter, and that is what I have shown on Dopplers. We can just switch on the Dopplers, or even it is very obviously visible that the longitudinal axis is seen. Then rotate the probe 90 degrees clockwise or anti-clockwise, wherein you get the transverse diameter. Then take all the measurements, and it will give you automated measurements on scan. This is very important, and not just the ovarian volume. I am not going to tell you about how important is ovarian volume. It is also important to measure the antral follicle count. It is not just important to measure the number of antral follicles, it is also important to measure the size of the antral follicle, because the woman responds differently to stimulation depending on the size of the antral follicle. Why is it important to detect ovarian cyst or hydrosalpinx? Cyst could later be misinterpreted as a developing follicle. Basal ovarian cysts significantly reduces the ovulating events in patients treated with ovulogens. Let me give you an example. Take 2 balloons, okay? Fill it tightly with water. Rupture one balloon immediately with pin. How does it rupture? It ruptures with a blast. Keep one more balloon for 1 week, then poke it with a pin. What will happen? It starts trickling down slowly. It won't rupture with a blast. This is the same mechanism what happens in a aged ovarian follicle. The tensile property of the follicle is lost. So that is why women tend to have retention cyst. Whenever we are having repeated retention cyst, our antennas should raise, thinking that she is a potential candidate of getting into poor ovarian reserve. So that's why it's very important to know whether there are retention cysts. Needless to say, hydrosalpinx reduces the ART outcome. If it is identified, we have to remove it before we plan for further treatment. Technical tips on how to scan the ovaries and also follicular growth. We have seen various folliculometry measurements or the scan reports, various types of measurements. It is just a single follicle in the largest diameter or 2 dimensions. But what do? They give it as 24 into 7, 28 into 10. As doctors, we are all weak in mathematics. I am not sure. I am definitely weak in mathematics. I cannot calculate the average. It's already it is automated calculation. You also all of us should measure the follicle uniformly. It should be a single diameter, right? So it should be from the isoechoic or the anechoic echogenic junction, outer to outer dimensions, and take it in orthogonal or perpendicular planes and take the measurement and give the average. Optic, and before that, for that matter, even if it is NT scan or when you are taking the endometrial measurement, the image in question should occupy 75% of the screen. So it should occupy the center of the screen, placement of the follicle calipers at the echogenic anechoic interface, and take it in orthogonal planes. How can we measure the follicle? Is it a single diameter, two diameters or three diameters? Let us understand by this study wherein if it is just one diameter and two diameters, the difference was 1.2. If it is one diameter and three diameters, again the difference was 1.2. If it was difference between two diameters and three diameters, the difference was just 0.3 mm. So practically all of us measure two largest orthogonal diameters and take a mean. There is a very well correlation of ultrasound with histological parameters. You can actually see the granulosa cell, theca cell and the antrum. How does a follicle grow? It is approximately 1.4 mm per day in a natural cycle, which increases to 1.7 to 2 mm in stimulated cycles up to 15 mm. But once it touches 15 mm, the acceleration of follicular growth can be seen, which is approximately 2.5 mm per day. And just before ovulation, it can reach up to 27 to 30 mm. There is further acceleration in growth just before ovulation. Characteristics of a mature follicle: size is approximately 16 to 18 mm. Thin walls, pencil-like walls, we call it as. We can actually speak to the follicles, whether it is going to rupture or not. Actually, follicles will tell us, yes, I am going to rupture. But we should have that patience to speak to the follicles. No echogenicities in the lumen, thin hypoechoic rim, cumulus-like shadow can be seen in 35 to 40%. How to predict mature oocyte from a folliculometry? Okay, we have understood, okay, we can trigger, but how do we know that this particular follicle will give us mature oocyte? One, it is by follicular size and volume, and the other one is by follicular power Doppler studies. M2 oocytes are more frequently retrieved from 16 to 20 mm sized follicle. On the contrary, when the follicle goes more than 22 mm, result is low because it has post-mature egg and it is because of intrafollicular atresia and also degenerative phenomena. About power Doppler study, blood vessels cover at least 3/4 of the follicular circumference. This is called as grade 3 to 4 vascularity, and most importantly, PSV should be more than 10 cm per second. And this is how we measure the peak systolic velocity and perifollicular blood flow. With this also we can anticipate that we can get a mature egg. Next comes the features of follicular rupture. We are all very well versed with features of follicular rupture, that is decrease in the size of the follicle or disappearance, fluid accumulation in the pouch of Douglas, and also triple line pattern. Why do you think echogenic pattern? It becomes more echogenic post ovulation. Why do you think endometrium becomes echogenic post ovulation? During proliferative phase, the glands are straight and they are perpendicular. They are straight. So the ultrasound beams pass parallel to these glands. But when they get into secretory phase, they undergo tortuous. They get into tortuosity. Also deposition of glycogen. So the beams no longer can pass through these glands in a parallel fashion. They get haywire, and that's how there will be echogenicities in the endometrium. Endometrial monitoring. Why is it very important? It is not just follicle monitoring is important. It is very important to see the endometrial changes as well. I will give you a case scenario. A woman who is having PCO, you have started with controlled ovarian stimulation. 6 days post ovulation, you see all the follicles are 6 to 7 mm. There is one more woman who is also having the same findings, but one woman is having endometrium of just 2 mm and the other woman is having endometrium of 6.5 to 7 mm with nice triple line. What is the clinical judgment that you are going to take? In whom you are probably going to increase the dose and in whom you are going to maintain the dose. Obviously, the woman who is having thin endometrium, we are going to increase the dose. You have to understand the physiology behind this. First, when the gonadotropins are administered, the granulosa cells are the ones which get stimulated. There is increase in number and that gives E2 output. When the E2 output is there, there is development of the endometrium. No E2 output, no endometrium. Antrum comes later. Granulosa cell proliferation happens earlier, which is not visible on scan, but however, indirect measurement is endometrium. So, this is just a simple example to tell you how important is endometrial measurement. It has various morphologies. At menstruation it is thin, and around the time of ovulation it is triple line pattern, and in the secretory phase it is thick. I have already mentioned how it looks like. This is how we measure the thickness of the endometrium from outer to outer diameter. We also have to measure vascularities. It is directly proportional. The good endometrial blood flow is directly proportional to good pregnancy rates. Zone 4 or zone 3 is what we expect. You can see zone 4 vascularity here. Now, after understanding what is folliculometry, what are the objectives? One, it is prediction of ovarian response. How does a woman respond to stimulation? That is, even before starting the stimulation. Monitor the effect of pituitary downregulation. Evaluate whether the dose of gonadotropin what we are giving is adequate or not. Find the optimal time to give HCG. As I told you, timing is everything. And identification and prevention of complications. First, let us understand prediction of ovarian response prior to controlled ovarian stimulation. The aim is to identify extremes of response, whether it is poor or hyper, and also to choose the optimal starting dose. There are various parameters. Among this, AFC is the most important tool to decide the starting dose. It is not just the antral follicle numbers, it is the antral follicle size. Various studies have been performed where we can decide the starting dose depending on the AFC, hyper, hypo or normal responder. The starting dose of gonadotropins can be decided depending on the AFC and AMH count. The second thing is monitoring the effect of pituitary downregulation. For the ease of fellowship students, I would say rule of 5. LH less than 5, E2 less than 50, E progesterone 0.5, and also endometrium thickness less than 5, and also absence of follicles more than 10 mm. Easy to remember, 5 mm size follicle. Evaluate whether the dose of gonadotropin is adequate or not. I told you very clearly, it is not just follicular growth, it is the endometrial response and also hormonal evaluation. Correlation of 3 components are very important, and no consensus about how often monitoring has to be done during ovarian stimulation. In a hyper or hypo responder, you would want to monitor frequently because you want to prevent complications like hyperstimulation in a hyper responder or cycle cancellation in a poor responder. The next thing is find the optimum time to give HCG. It is different in different kinds of patients and different kinds of protocol. In a long protocol, there is a well-controlled hormonal milieu. The pituitary downregulation is very well established. Arbitrary delay of 1 or 2 days. That's why in batch IVFs they prefer to do long protocols. At least 3 follicles measuring 17 to 20 mm diameter with appropriate E2 should be there. In an antagonist protocol, more than or equal to 3 follicles of maximum diameter of more than or equal to 17 mm and also appropriate rise in E2 levels. Very tricky is poor responders. We always have that, what should I say, we are too greedy to get more and more follicles. 2 more in 16, 17, 18 mm follicles and then 2 more follicles and then one day I will wait. This is what gives us heart. So they will have premature luteinization. That is why it's very important to trigger these poor responder patients when more or equal to 2 follicles of 16 to 18 mm diameter. The next thing is identification and prevention of complications. I'm going to share very interesting facts with you with these identification and of complication. One, premature luteinization. In yesteryears, like probably when the IVF started, the premature luteinization incidence was as high as 25 to 50%. Now it has come down to probably less than 5% in cycles thanks to monitoring. Luteinized unruptured follicle, it's an elusive entity. We still don't know what is it and how to tackle this. Poor response to stimulation and hyper response. What is premature luteinization? Follicles less than 15 mm with echoes are seen, and these correlate with high progesterone levels in the follicular phase. Usually this happens in poor responders and also in hyper responders. Remember, it is not always fixed protocol is better. I beg to differ here because the follicle, the hypothalamus does not recognize the size of the follicle. The hypothalamus will only recognize the output of E2. So, a hyper responder may have a premature E2 elevation much before in her stimulation, probably even in 4th day of stimulation or 5th day of stimulation. We cannot always wait, yes, 5th day, fixed protocol, I will add antagonist on 5th day. No, we may not be always right. So, prevention of premature luteinization, ultrasound has got a very important role. As I told you, elusive entity of luteinized unruptured follicle. Dominant follicle is still accurate 48 hours after administration of HCG or LH surge. The size of the follicle may reach as much as 34 to 36 millimeter with thick walls. Endometrium is thick, echogenic, no fluid in pouch of Douglas. It is due to insufficient LH or insufficient strength of LH surge to induce follicle rupture, but it is sufficient to induce oocyte maturation. What is the use? If there is no rupture, just because there is maturation, if the follicle or the oocyte is arrested within this cage of follicle, it's of no use. Do you know, I came across an interesting article in 1984. How did they diagnose luteinized unruptured follicle? Did you know? Almost 100 women they scanned, out of which they suspected luteinized unruptured follicle in 54 women. And they diagnosed it by laparoscopy or even laparotomy. I mean, thanks to those seniors who have done IVF in yesteryears, how much they've given information to us. How did they diagnose? Actually, the gold standard to diagnose LUF is laparoscopy, because if there is stigma, if there is site of rupture, that means it is ovulation. If there is no stigma, it is luteinized unruptured follicle. And they diagnosed it is approximately 34%, as high as 34% we can have luteinized unruptured follicle, especially in women who are having endometriotic cysts and also in women who are poor responders. As I told you, the tensile strength capacity of the follicle is lost. Ultrasound findings to predict OHSS, PCO pattern, number of follicles more than 20. Not just concentrate about the dominant follicles. Please concentrate on the intermediate follicles. We always tend to forget intermediate follicles. They are the ones which give the bulk of E2, which stimulates VEGF and subsequently the cascade of OHSS. Doppler having low intravascular resistance is also a good predictor. Very important, record maintenance. I have seen prescriptions where one day somewhere something is scribbled, other day somewhere something is scribbled. It doesn't work like just 1 minute. So we have to have day and date of cycle, number of developing follicles in each ovary, dynamics of follicular growth, endometrial thickness, quantity of medication, type of regime, blah blah. Everything should be documented in a single paper, so that it's a wealth of information what we're giving you to the patient. She may meet some other doctor some other day, but we have to, there is wealth of information, and this is called as amnestic response. Go back and read what is amnestic response. To conclude, 2D ultrasound scanning of follicle size is still the method of choice for monitoring stimulated cycles. It is most practical and is still reliable enough for monitoring ovarian stimulation. Combining ultrasound monitoring with E2 is particularly valuable for monitoring poor responders as well as those at risk of OHSS. Thank you.